Okay, afternoon everybody. Welcome to Gedling Borough Council Cabinet meeting, Thursday the 17th of February, 2 o'clock. For those who are listening back to the recording or watching the recording, we do apologise, but there is a technical issue, so I'm afraid you're stuck with me on the camera as I understand it, and my fellow Cabinet colleagues, you won't be able to see, I don't think, throughout the meeting, but you should be able to hear them, so do bear with us in that regard, but hopefully the sound system will be recording. Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence. We have received apologies from Leader of the Council, Councillor John Clark, who would ordinarily chair Cabinet, and also apologies from Councillor Viv McCrossan today. So I'll be chairing today's meeting as Deputy Leader of the Council. I don't think there are any other apologies. So item 2 is to approve as a correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 27th of January 2022. Any comments or questions in relation to the minutes? People happy to approve them as a correct record? Moved by Councillor Ellis. They're seconded. Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. They are approved. Item 3 then is declaration of interest from any members or officers. Are there any declarations people want to raise at this stage? I'm not seeing any indication. Item 4 is the forward plan, which is here to note, unless anybody wants to raise any issues in relation to the forward plan, which is page 9 to 14 in the pack. Anything anybody wants to raise in relation to the forward plan? Is that noted then? Okay. Item 5 then is the Prudential and Treasury Indicators and Treasury Management Strategy Statement 2022-2023, and I think this is going to be introduced by Paul.
Thank you, Chair. This is the report where members agreed the parameters within which we'll conduct our investment and borrowing activity for the new financial year, 2022-23. Seems like only just a couple of weeks ago we did the quarter 3 Treasury Management report for the current year, but and some things that we mentioned at that report have significance in terms of the strategy for 22-23, and I'll come on to those in a moment. As we set out back in January, new versions of both the Treasury Management Code and the Prudential Code, which kind of govern how we undertake the Treasury Management function, were approved and were published back in December. And we've reflected those in the strategies that we've presented to members here today. One of the key things in terms of the new requirements is a new liability benchmark. That's to do with managing risk in terms of our capital financing requirement. In other words, our underlying need to borrow. So again, it's all about kind of reporting and making sure that we comply with everything to make sure that our borrowing is prudent, affordable and sustainable. Members will see reference in this particular report to the capital strategy, and we'll come on to that in the next report on today's agenda, because both capital expenditure and Treasury management, particularly our debt management activity, are very closely related. A consultation recently closed as well in terms of minimum revenue provision. Don't be worried about by the jargon. That's simply the amount of money that the council needs to put aside each year for the repayment of its debt liabilities. And again, already in terms of what's proposed in that consultation, we as a council already fully comply with the requirements of that already. Members will also be aware one of the requirements statutorily required in terms of the Treasury management is that we report, not only do we produce a strategy report each year, an outturn report and a half-yearly monitoring report, we also, we at Gaddling, that's required by statute, at Gaddling we get over and above that. What we also do are quarterly reports as well. So we're more than meeting the kind of minimum reporting requirements in terms of our Treasury management activity. Just moving on in terms of the new codes that have come in, there's a greater focus in there for training for elected members, and that's something that we'll look to do in the new year, maybe with our advisors link, or we may do something ourselves. We'll kind of consult with members, find out what the preferred method of training you would prefer, and we'll seek to arrange something for you to that effect. A couple of points to note in the report itself. On 2.13 on page 24, our financing costs as a proportion of our net revenue stream are projected to increase in the coming years. Again, we've made assumptions, and Alison will talk about these in the budget report later on, regarding our net revenue stream. Hopefully, if we can increase that and reduce that ratio, then that will be good, but it's something we'll keep an eye on as we kind of go through both forthcoming year and subsequent years. As I mentioned previously, the Prudential Indicators set out in this report, they're designed to make sure that the borrowing that we do is prudent, affordable and sustainable. As an authority, a local authority, we can only borrow in support of capital expenditure. We can't borrow to cover our day-to-day revenue expenditure. And as we set out in the report, it's a very highly regulated area within which we operate as well. And this kind of report, it's not only setting the strategy, it's making sure that us as officers comply with everything that we're supposed to do. You'll see in the report as well reference to the investment strategy. Clearly, we have to make sure that the investments that we make are properly secure. We follow a hierarchy when we do that. We're required to follow. We make sure, first and foremost, any investments we make are secure, that they are liquid, in terms of we can get the money back when we need it. And third and final in that hierarchy is yield. Yield is always the third factor for us to consider in the hierarchy. Security of our investments always comes first. And you'll see us set out in the report, most of our investments are short-term in terms of less than 1 year duration. You'll also see in the report something that the new codes touch upon and which is becoming increasingly more apparent in the wider media as well. It's the whole environmental, social and governance agenda. And clearly the world of Treasury management has got to reflect that. We're aware of the climate challenge and the fact that we had to have good governance where we invest our money as an authority, make sure that it kind of meets what members' aspirations and is in line with the priorities that's set by members. You'll start to see, and we'll report back to members increasingly going forwards, more details as that starts to mature. We'll start to hear more about what's required of us in terms of the whole ESG agenda. It's going to become more and more important, no doubt. It's reflected in the new codes, and what we'll do, we'll make sure that we comply on that and that we operate in line with members' aspirations. There are 4 appendices to the report. Appendix 1 is the actual Prudential Indicators for next year through to 2026-27. Those are the parameters within which Alison, as the 151 officer, has to make sure that we as a council conduct our Treasury management activity. Appendix 2 is from our advisors link, which just shows interest rate projections for the next few years. Again, you're probably following the local national media. Interest rates, after many, many years, are hardly changing at all. We've had a couple of recent rate increases. Gone up to the base rate, went up to 0.5% in February. Indications are it's going to go higher. Have to obviously be aware of that, the implications of that for us as a council. And we'll be reporting back to members on that in our quarterly monitoring reports. Appendix 3 is just for information. It just shows the different categories of investment within which the council can invest its money. Most of our investments are very, very short term in highly liquid money market funds. We can make a call in the morning, get the money back later on that day. And they're also AAA rated as well. And finally, Appendix 4 just shows you, should we ever need to, if we needed to invest money abroad, again, we define the parameters in which we would do that. It would only be in countries with a minimum rating of AA-, according to the main rating agencies. That's all I've got to say about the report itself, but I will be happy to answer any questions that members may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul, and thank you for your usual diligence in presenting the report. And also let me just say on behalf of the Cabinet, and I think the entire authority, a huge thank you to you, to our Section 151 officer, Alison Ball, for the work that has been done by not only both of you, but also the wider team in relation to this important piece of work, which obviously effectively is a trio of reports here today in front of us, including the Forward Capital Programme and also the general fund revenue budget in terms of funding day-to-day services for the year ahead. Are there any comments or questions for Paul on this? Councillor Ellis?
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo your thanks for this report. Demonstrates that we are working cautiously and sensibly, which is what you'd expect. And just pick up Paul's comment about training. I mean, I was on what I think was the last training, which must be now 3 years ago. And actually, that was done by our external advisors, which meant that I could make more sense of the reports. So it's always useful to have a refresher. So I'd support providing additional training for members. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think that's
We'll commit to fulfilling that in the next 12 months.
Great, thank you. Any other questions? The recommendations then are on page 15 in our pack, which are that members are recommended to approve the Prudential and Treasury Indicators and Treasury Management Strategy Statement, the TMSS, for 2022-23, which includes the key elements below, and refer it to full council on the 3rd of March, which is a meeting of all councillors, 2022, for the approval as required by the regulations, which are A, the minimum revenue provision policy statement, B, the borrowing strategy, C, the annual investment strategy, D, the capital affordability prudential indicators for 2022-23 to 24-25, and E, the Treasury indicators, including affordability limits to borrowing for 2022 to 2024-25. And the second recommendation is to note the indicative prudential and Treasury indicators for 2025-26 and 26-27, which are referenced in Appendix 1. I'll move the recommendations. Somebody happy to second them? Seconded by Councillor Hollingsworth. People happy to approve them as... Yep. Okay, that's agreed unanimously. Thank you. Item 6 then is our capital programme and capital investment strategy, which is on page 59 to 88 of our pack. And I think this is going to be introduced by Paul again.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This report sets out the proposed capital programme over the 5-year period that we'll soon be going into. Obviously, particular attention is on the 22-23 programme, which we're proposing £6.46 million, and details of how that is comprised are set out in the report. Just a couple of the major items to bring to members' attention. You'll see in there, obviously, vehicle replacement programme of £1.42 million, the Burton Road affordable housing, £779,000, Station Road, likewise, £545,000, and also as well an assumed £1 million for a disabled facilities grant. Hopefully that should be confirmed for us in the next few weeks. Also as well, what you'll see in the report as well are details of new developments that we've identified. Those have come through the council scoring methodology. I'll talk about that when we come on to Appendix 1. Again, we've kind of received bids from departments and we've put those in the report as well. Of course, the 22-23 programme as well may be supplemented. When we do the outturn report for this year, there may be some slippage from this current year into next year. We'll pick that up when we do the outturn report and we'll report that to members in due course. Of course, our capital expenditure, as you would imagine, has to be paid for. And there are a number of different sources of funding for the capital programme. And we set out an update on each of these in the report, namely in terms of our position on capital receipts, capital grants and contributions, any revenue funding, and the borrowing that we intend to do in order to finance the capital programme. There are 2 appendices to the report. Appendix 1 is the capital investment strategy. Again, the previous report made reference to that. Capital and Treasury management, there's very close interconnection between the two. The capital investment strategy, that sets out the principles and framework within which we will conduct our capital investments. And you'll see in there the scoring methodology by which we appraise capital schemes that come forward for approval by yourselves as members to go into the capital programme. Also, in terms of the capital strategy, details of the various other strategies that we have that it links into, that our capital investments link into. Most notably, the Gedling plan and the priorities that members have approved is set out in there. And Appendix 2 sets out the proposed 5-year capital programme as of today and on a scheme-by-scheme basis. So you can see there at a glance what's envisaged in each of the 5 years, with particular emphasis on the forthcoming year, 22-23. That's all I've got to say by way of an introduction. I'll be happy to answer any questions that any members may have. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and again, thanks for your thorough presentation of the report and what is a very good report. And just to say thank you again to you and to Alison and to the team, and indeed, actually, every single member of the staff at the council for the work that they've done in bringing forward some of these ideas and suggestions, and also elected members. For me, in moving this report and moving the recommendations, what I'm really pleased to see is, in spite of the financial difficulty, investment in additional CCTV, investment in affordable housing at Burton Road and Station Road, which will include temporary accommodation, continuing investment in our play areas across the borough. Proud that this administration has already invested in many handfuls of play areas across the borough, additional car park resurfacing, while at the same time protecting this Labour administration's 2 hours free parking policy, which I think all residents and businesses would accept has been an extremely good success over the time that it's been in place since we introduced it. And also particularly proud to see this council bringing forward what will be the first significant Holocaust memorial at Gedling Country Park, which I think is absolutely appropriate that we learn the lessons of the awful events that have gone on in the past. And I think it's really nice that that memorial will be situated within a new cherry tree reflection and memorial area as a place where people can just go and quietly remember those who have lost their lives in the borough. as local residents, amongst many, many other things that are included in this capital programme, at the same time that it continues to be incredibly difficult for us in terms of cuts that are coming down from central government. So I'll open it up to comments and questions from anybody. Councillor Barnes. Microphone, Peter.
I'm just worried about some of the people who live in some of the older properties we've got. Are we going to get this energy sorted out for them, where they've got to have double glazing, they've got to have heat resistant? Are we going to, I mean, it seems an open till to me. And I don't know how we're going to adjust that people who need some extra money for heating are going to have the money to do what they need to do in their properties, because they're all sort of my age and probably older. They aren't having that kind of money to reheat redo the old house up. And I don't know, it's just a bit frightening for them. Well, I think it is anyway.
I mean, I think you raise a good point, Peter, and obviously it's a point of concern for every household, I would suspect, across the borough about the escalation of energy costs, and which is why we as a council proposed a motion at the last full council meeting setting out clearly what the government needs to do. And I think the recognition is this is such a huge problem that it does require government intervention on the issue. We've obviously seen some announcements from the government, but we're still waiting for detail around some of those. The council will continue to do what it can do, and you'll see there are some measures in the next item, the budget, in relation to supporting those. But I think the main thing we can continue to do is put pressure on our members of parliament and the government to take action in this area. It's not only a national problem, but also an international problem, and the government needs to act, frankly. And also some of these large businesses who are making significant profits need to make sure that they're sharing some of those profits in recognising the pressure that's put on households. Councillor Hollingsworth.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to echo the comments you made about, despite the difficulties, we've managed to put forward a really exciting programme. Also to thank the officers, because I think this is a really clear report and does set out that our financial management and prudence has enabled some of these exciting projects to go forward. So these are the aspirations of the council and the aspirations of Gedling Borough residents. So it's nice to see, and I look forward to the developments, certainly on Burton Road and Station Road, of new affordable housing. So thank you, Leader.
Thanks, Jenny, and thank you to you as well for pushing some of these projects in your portfolio, because you've certainly, the Burton Road and Station Road developments have been really pushing them in spite of some of the challenges that there have been, which is as true of every individual portfolio holder and, as you said, of officers as well. I'll move the recommendations, which are that members are recommended to note the estimated capital financing available for 2022-23 to 26-27, that we approve the capital investment strategy 2022-23 to 26-27 detailed at Appendix 1 and refer it to Council for approval on the 3rd of March 2022, and 3, that we approve the capital programme for 22-23 to 24-25 detailed at Appendix 2 and refer that also to the Council for approval on the 3rd of March 22, and 4, that we note the indicative capital programme for 25-26 to 26-27. So I'll move that. Somebody happy to second? Councillor Ellis seconded. People happy to approve? Agreed? Unanimously? Thank you. The next item then on the agenda is the General Fund Revenue Budget 2022-23, and I think this is going to be introduced by Alison.
It is. Thank you very much, Chair. This General Fund Budget Report sets out the continuing financial challenges that Gaddling faces following the unprecedented cuts to central government funding and the ongoing uncertainties due to the economic impact related to COVID-19. In respect of government grant funding, you will recall that the last planned comprehensive spending review completed by government, the fair funding review and the business rates retention review were all deferred, firstly due to Brexit and then due to COVID-19, resulting in 1 year only spending rounds for the last 2 years. This year, the comprehensive spending review was finally completed, providing a 3-year spending round and indicating an average 3% annual real terms increase in core spending power for local government. However, this has not translated into a 3-year financial settlement. Once again, due to COVID-19, there has been a further delay in the fair funding review, the process which intends to update the system for distributing local government funding to ensure that it's based on need, meaning that another one-year local government finance settlement has been announced. That ongoing delay means that the councils still have no clarity or certainty over how services will be funded beyond next year, which represents incredible challenges in the development of a sustainable medium-term financial plan. This is exacerbated by the uncertainties around the impact of COVID-19 and Brexit on economic growth and the demand and inflationary pressures that we're now experiencing. The one-year final local government finance settlement was announced on the 7th of February and confirmed in Parliament on the 9th. And that's made up of our settlement funding assessment and other key grants. Based on the government's assessment of core spending power, which also includes an assumption for maximum increases in council tax, which of course we know is in fact determined locally, Gedling now has the 7th largest reduction of all councils in England compared to the last comprehensive spending review in 2015-16. It is worth noting that only 11 councils in England have seen a reduction of more than 10% in core spending power, whilst 249 councils have in fact seen an increase in the same period, with the largest increase for a comparable district council reaching 26%. For the previous 2 years, Gaddling were also the worst affected council in England in terms of core spending power, and the marginally improved position that we have this year is due to our success in securing some new homes bonus for next year, which is based on growth in the number of new properties in the area and empty properties coming back into use also. The award has been confirmed at just under £428,000 and will be for 1 year only. We will also receive a legacy payment of £93,000 relating to the 2019 bonus that was awarded before the system was changed. The future of new homes bonus, it does remain uncertain, and it will now be considered as part of the fair funding review going forward. So whilst we have received the additional one-off award this year, which is positive for us, changes made to the new homes bonus scheme over the years have had a real detrimental impact on Gedling's budgets. And when comparing to what we received 6 years ago under this scheme, we've effectively lost £1.9 million per annum from our budget compared to this year. As part of the settlement, the government has continued the lower tier services grant for another year. It's introduced this last year just for district councils. And again, it is split into two parts. The first part is based on a need assessment, which has been received by all, will be received by all district councils. For Gaddling, this is £138,000. The second part was to provide a minimum floor funding so that no authority has a reduction in core spending power when compared to the previous year. But like last year, there was no consideration of core spending power reductions prior to 2021, and that this appears to benefit those that have not previously suffered reductions in new homes bonus, even though the legacy payment reductions would have been planned for. Our consultation responses questioned the treatment for the second year running, but again, there were no changes within the final settlement. The government has introduced a new grant this year, a new services grant, they've called it. Again, it's for 1 year only, whilst the fair funding review is being completed. The money will stay in the pot, but we don't know how that will be distributed. This cash is for all tiers of local government in recognition of the services that we provide and also to help manage some inflationary pressures. For example, this does include funding for the increased national insurance contributions that are arising from the health and social care levy. Gaddling will receive £212,000, but that doesn't cover all of the inflationary pressures that we face. So just turning now to the General Fund Budget Summary, which is detailed in paragraph 2.5 of the report, members will note the increase in net budget of £720,000, which is mainly due to inflationary pressures, some of which were expected and some not. It does include a 3% pay award, so that's up from what we previously forecast at 2%. That's in recognition of likely upward pressures arising from the cost of living increases and national wage growth being experienced. It also includes the increase in national insurance contributions, increased utilities, fuel and software prices, increased demands that we're facing on waste and street cleansing, and also increased costs and rent allowances. In terms of direct COVID impacts, we anticipate some improvement in income next year, but we don't expect our leisure income to return to pre-pandemic levels until 23-24. Over 3 years, the direct cost of COVID not covered by government grant is expected to reach £1 million, excluding the impact on collection funds, and we also expect some further losses in terms of increased debt. But our budget assumes we will not face any further COVID expenditure pressures in next year, and if they do arise, they will need to be covered by other budget reductions. To manage our past funding reductions, Gedling has been successful in developing a number of efficiency programmes totalling £6.5 million since 2014-15, of which 1.2 million we're still delivering over 21-22 to 24-25, but that is currently progressing well. You will recall, though, from last year's budget process that due to the uncertainties of settlement funding and potential pressures expected to arise from COVID-19, that Council did agree a further efficiency target of £600,000 as part of the medium-term financial plan, requiring that plans for delivery should be developed if these risks actually materialised. As I've already said, those risks are materialising. They are ongoing risks as well in all likelihood, and a new efficiency programme of £545,000 is now proposed as detailed in paragraph 2.52 of the report. A new 10% risk provision of £50,000 is also included in the budget to help us manage the inherent risk that we always face in delivery of an efficiency programme. So given the financial position, only modest growth is proposed in terms of revenue growth. That's detailed in the report at paragraph 2.54. We've got £109,000 in for next year, and just £36,500 of that is ongoing. And that's mainly related to investment in cybersecurity measures to mitigate the impact of risks that are identified in that area and are present in our corporate risk register. A 3% increase in discretionary fees and charges is proposed for Cabinet approval, and that generates just under £100,000 per annum, and that's detailed in paragraph 2.55 of the report. I've completed a review of reserves, and that's detailed in paragraph 2.5.7. The minimum general fund balance is set at £1 million. Earmarked reserves has been reviewed in light of the financial challenges, and in the region of £700,000 could be reclassified back to general use if required to support the budget, but we'll need to review that in light of the current year's outturn position. The medium-term financial plan is presented in paragraph 3 of the report. It's presented, as I've already said, it's presented against the backdrop of major uncertainty of funding beyond next year, and the uncertainty of local government finance reforms, the uncertainty related to inflationary and demand pressures. Council tax increases are restricted by government to the higher of 2% or £5 without a referendum, and this maximum is assumed in the medium-term financial plan, but of course this will be determined by Council on an annual basis. So based on the current information available, in order to achieve a balanced medium-term financial plan, additional ongoing budget reductions or funding increases of at least £1 million will be required, with £100,000 recognised in 2023-24 and a further £900,000 in 24-25. So that's what we've assumed in the medium-term financial plans at this point. So whilst that's not yet supported by outlined business plans, given the backdrop of funding uncertainty and the fact that savings are not required until year 2 of the plan, that does allow us some time to develop those options for delivery if they are required. And so we will be considering those during next financial year. So finally, as Section 151 officer, I'm legally obliged to comment on the budget prepared, and I can advise Cabinet that these estimates are sufficiently robust, that the level of reserves that are forecast to be held at the 31st of March 2023 are what is professionally deemed as to be adequate. So I'll leave it there, Chair. The recommendations are set out on what I believe is page 89 and I'd be happy to try and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Alison. And whilst a huge thanks, I think, goes to our Chief Executive and every member of staff at the Council for sound, I think, cautious, as Councillor Ellis said, and sensible financial management. I've seen, particularly as the portfolio holder for finance alongside the rest of Cabinet and the Leader of the Council this year, just how tremendously difficult it has been to balance the budget given competing pressures this year. And I just want to specifically single out yourself for thanks, because I think your experience, your diligence that you have brought to the table and the leadership on this issue, I think is displayed in what I think is an excellent report in very, very difficult circumstances. And two things just really stand out to me in relation to the report, which I think is testimony to you, Alison, that we're still able to invest in certain areas, even though, as you said, it's only modest growth. One, we are doing this in the face of, we're sat here today, aren't we, Storm Dudley and Storm Eunice to follow. Well, there aren't only significant headwinds out there on the street. The Council's facing very, very significant headwinds in terms of some of the issues, not least government reductions. And two things strike me. One, the point you have made to us as our senior financial officer, which is quite stark, really, for the residents and businesses that we serve here in Gedling. That Gedling is in a pack of 12 councils out of 341 councils in England that have seen a above 10% reduction in their core spending power. That is the money available for them to fund their services since 2015, 2016, whilst at the same time we've had 249 councils seeing an increase in their core spending power. Now, anybody who I think is trying to paint that as either fair, levelling up, or a success of this government is completely and utterly kidding themselves, because I think the ordinary member of the public out there will know, being in a pack of 11 that have seen above 10% reduction in the money and funding available for them to keep their services versus 249 councils in England who have seen an increase in their core spending power. I think the good people of Gaddling would call a spade and say that that is downright unfair and that they are paying their tax into the system and that it's playing wrong. And I think the fact that you've landed this budget in that setting is to your credit, Alison. The only other point I'd raise, there'll be a further discussion about the budget at full council, is this to our residents. We have a present-day budget that we are putting forward for the year ahead, 2022-2023, of around about 12.3 million. Since 2014, this administration, supported by you, Alison, and its officers, has taken £6.5 million out of its budget, its day-to-day spending, and is proposing to take a further £1.2 million out of its budget. That's a total of £7.7 million by the few years in front of us, out of a present-day budget of £12.3 million. Let me put it another way. If you were running your household and you were asked to remove well over half of the budget that your household relied on, and Councillor Barnes raised the issue earlier about the pressure on households, would you be able to do it? And I think certainly the answer from me is no, I wouldn't be able to do it. But you and the officers here at the council have continued to do it. You have protected frontline services. And I think the point I want to make here today from the chair is not to seek credit for me or the administration or the cabinet that sits here, but to both say thank you to you and officers for keeping the show on the road, particularly given that in that period I've just described where we've taken 7 million out of the budget, we've had probably the worst public health crisis since the Second World War, and to thank every single member of staff for protecting those frontline services. And let me just say this on behalf of the Cabinet and the Leader of the Council. I know, because I see the staff every single day at this Council, are feeling the pressure, and that at the moment we are relying on an awful lot of goodwill for those colleagues who we rely on to keep the streets clean, to collect our bins, to make sure that the restaurants and the food suppliers around the borough are maintained as decent and healthy, to support the police in terms of responding to crime and antisocial behaviour as they do, to invest in our leisure centres and the many, many other services that we provide as a council. But let me also say this as well, a huge thank you to the residents, because this council is funded increasingly less so by central government and increasingly so by its residents through council tax and by to a degree, it's businesses through business rates, and both our residents in Gedling and our businesses, particularly over the last 2 years, but over the last 10 years, have had it incredibly tough. And I want to say thank you to all the residents who have played a part in this council being able to maintain its services. We can't do it without you. We absolutely understand that you are under pressure. We know that asking for a slight increase, as we are going to be doing in your council tax, albeit pence a week is still money that you have to find and that they can't spend on something else. So I want to say to our residents that we absolutely understand where you're at, and we will do everything we can to continue to press the government to make sure that we are felt that we are treated fairly, because I certainly don't think that we are being treated fairly, and I think the facts you've presented to us, Alison, bear that out. So in saying that, I'll open the report and recommendations to any questions or points that Cabinet members want to raise. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you, Alison, and the department. As you just said, you've done a tremendous job. What worries me is the member of our staff who've got to live under these conditions, and there's jobs on the market which they want to go to. We might be leaving more staff than what we really need to lose. And I don't want any of our staff to go. And I want people in Gedling Borough to have a fair crack of it. We don't seem as though we're getting a fair crack of the whip from central government. And the people of Gedling seem to be paying the price for it. And whether it's because we're the different colour to the central government, I don't know. But it certainly looks that way from my point of view. Everybody in Gedling is taking the kick from central government on what we've got to do with our business rate and general rate fund. It's obscene the way we've been treated, and I think the more we start to say it, the more people will understand. When you look at other districts and other counties, what funding they get from central government and what we get in, it's a damn right disgrace. And the more we say it, the better people in Gedling will understand what system and what the problems we've got as a council to try and achieve a fair proportion to people in Gedling Borough to live on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Barnes. Councillor Ellis.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to repeat the thanks to Alison and the team for this report, which clearly sets out the position, very clearly sets out the position. I think it's particularly credible to be able to brought a budget in, given the backdrop. And I'd like to pull out two things that are in the report. The basic level of uncertainty, the uncertainty around the economy, which we can't do anything about. There's the uncertainty about government policy on local government funding, which is getting increasingly frustrating, that the government can't take a fair, clear position, and a position on COVID. And all this has been, all the work around the budget has been brought in at the same time as the finance team has been dealing with other things like the distribution of additional grants. So I think we need to recognise the amount of work that's gone in from the finance team generally. But very clearly, the government is continuing its two key policies as they affect local government, as the increasing move for funding of local government from the central exchequer to the to council tax. When expectation would make maximum use of flexibility, there's not much flexibility if you can't do anything other than do the maximum. And of course, the continuing austerity, as you said, Chair, the level of cuts. Just think, if we had another 7.5 million in our budget, what more we could be doing for the people of Gedling. So it's obviously a difficult position, but again, thanks to Alison, Mike, and the team for getting us to this position. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Well said. Any other comments or questions on the report? No? Okay. Well, the recommendations are that Cabinet approves a 3% discretionary income inflation increase for the individual portfolios as shown in the table at paragraph 2.55, and that we recommend to Council on the 3rd of March 2022, firstly, that the financial threshold above which decisions will be regarded as key decisions to be set at £0.5 million to 22-23. Secondly, that a council tax increase of 2.89% or £5, which balances the financing of a net council tax requirement of 6,726,800 in 2022-23. And thirdly, that that the detailed budget of 22-23, as detailed in Appendix 2, be approved. So I will move those recommendations. Somebody happy to second? Councillor Ellis has seconded. Colleagues happy to approve? Thank you. That's agreed unanimously. Thank you very much, Alison, to you and to everybody else involved in a difficult piece of work, but a very good and thorough piece of work that's important to keep services running in the year ahead. Item 8 then on our agenda today is a review of the Gedling Plan 2020-23, which sets out the stated initiatives and projects and commitments of the Council in the years to come, who is responsible for those projects and how we're going to deliver them. And this report's going to be introduced by Chief Executive Mike.
Thank you, Chair. The Gedling Plan will move into its third and final year in April coming, and as part of the Council's governance process, officers have reviewed the plan and its contents for relevance, moving forward and setting this for the year 2022-23. Delivery of the actions contained within the three-year plan are, of course, well underway now, and some are now being recorded as being complete or nearing completion. And certainly by the end of March 2023, we hope that all of the 96 actions will be delivered at that point. These delivery of the actions so far has been reflected in the refreshed Gedling Plan as attached to the report. And just as a reminder, Chair, the delivery of these actions is monitored and reported to Cabinet as part of the quarterly monitoring report. For next year, we have also added 2 new actions to the plan, the first being to carry out a Gedling Plan survey to support the formulation of the next 4-year period of the Gedling Plan. And again, this is in line with the budget cuts already outlined in the previous report. So we need to focus our resources accordingly to what our residents want us to do, and that consultation will be a key part of that exercise. The second addition is to increase the prosperity and connectedness of our rural communities. Again, we've recognised our rural areas are extremely important to this council, and it has now been recognised and included in the new Gedling Plan. There is a final amendment, Chair, which is just has been made to reflect the imminent name change of the local NHS integrated care system, and that proposed new name is the Place-Based Partnership, and that has been reflected in the report. So just to finish this off, can I place on record my thanks to Alan Green, who has done an incredible amount of work putting this report together, and also all of the staff and the teams involved in updating the plan. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Mike, and I think Cabinet would echo your thanks to both Alan and to everybody else involved in what I think is quite an easy-to-read, refreshing, clear document that sets out the commitments of the Council, as you said, in the coming period, and they're the commitments that will be held to account quite rightly by our residents, businesses, communities on. I'll open it up for discussion or questions on the report. No? Okay. Peter?
These figures there. I mean, how are we going to... I mean, I'd love to say that we're going to find the money to do all this, but under the present circumstances and the way the government treats us, are we going to be in the position to do this? I mean, I'd like to think we are, but knowing central government the way they treated us in the last 2 years, 3 years, we're going to be struggling, aren't we?
Right.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, Councillor Barnes. This is the 3-year plan, and we're approaching the end of it. So we're well underway with delivering most of these. But you're quite right, times are getting incredibly difficult. Not only resources, but capacity of staff as well to deliver all these options. But we're certainly trying our best to deliver all these by the end of next March, and we're hopeful we will get there. But clearly, it's getting more difficult week by week.
Which I try to run. And if we've got to go for electric vehicles or different vehicles, that's going to cost us arm and a leg. And we're talking about the next 2 or 3 years. And the funding what we've got now is not sufficient. And diesel's gone. Now we change it over to red diesel. That's a bit more expensive. So the bills are not going down. They're going up all the while. And central government. It just don't make sense. And I don't know how we get it across to the... I mean, you can't tell somebody on a low income wage that we're struggling when they're bloody struggling themselves, and they've got no conscientious of when we're talking about millions, they're talking about pounds, shillings and pence for the weekend. And it's just mind-boggling. I mean, I've been on here a long, long time now, and this is the worst I've ever seen our finances and the way we're going from central government in 46 years. And it smells.
Yeah, I mean, Mike's right, isn't he? You raise a good point, Peter. There are challenges, huge challenges. We just had a discussion about that in terms of the budget, but I think this plan is a credible plan. I think it's very realistic. It will stretch people. It will put pressure on our staff, as I said earlier, and we're very grateful for the hard work that the staff are doing. But also, I think, as Councillor Hollingsworth said earlier, it's committing in areas where the public want to see us deliver and where they need their council to stand up for them and support their local communities or businesses or them as individual households and residents. So I think it is a realistic plan. I think, as you said, Councillor Barnes, we need to stay focused to this specific plan, get the remainder of the commitments in it delivered, and only hope, as Councillor Ellis said earlier, that some of the uncertainty is brought to an end and that the government does bring forward some of its reviews around funding, that actually it does give us a longer term settlement in terms of funding and doesn't just keep funding us year upon year, and also that it does something to resolve the patent unfairness, that Councillor Ellis and others have already referred to earlier in the discussion. Councillor Hollingsworth?
Yes, thank you. I absolutely understand what Councillor Barnes is saying, and clearly things are going to be challenging going forward, but we've always been an aspirational council. I hope we continue to be an aspirational council. I think that's what our residents expect and want for themselves and their neighbours and their families. So I'm very proud of that local plan. It's very pleasing to hear that we're coming to the end and so much of it's already been achieved. So aspiration all the time, challenging, yes. And the uncertainties there, we saw that in the previous report. It must be a 151 officer's worst nightmare to have that level of uncertainty. So thank you to officers who actually bring us a level of certainty in these documents going forward. I'm very pleased to see the rural communities being included in future plans going forward. I'd like to just thank Councillor Nayuk, who's done a tremendous lot of work and brought together a report on the needs of rural communities. So I look forward to plans for that as well. So thank you.
Well said, Councillor Hollingsworth, and I'd certainly echo your points about the work that Councillor Nyack's done alongside yourself in terms of some of the challenges that are faced in rural communities, and certainly that, as you said, it's important that we take some of that work and that learning forward. I'll move the recommendations, which are on page 191 of our pack, which is that we review the Gedling plan, we note the review of the Gedling plan 2020 to 23, and that the amendments to the actions contained in the Gedling plan as set out in the report be agreed for referral to Council on the 3rd of March for approval. I'll move the recommendations. Seconded by Councillor Barnes. People happy to agree? Thank you very much. Thank you, Mike, and everybody else involved in not only pulling the report together but delivering so much, as Councillor Hollingsworth said, of the plan already. Item 9 on our agenda then is parking provision for residential and non-residential developments, supplementary planning document, otherwise known as an SPD, and very grateful to have our member of the planning policy team, Joe Gray, here with us to present the report. I think it was going to be our head of planning, Mike Avery, but I know he's not very well, so Cabinet sends our best wishes to Mike for speedy recovery and getting well soon, Mike. But Joe, you are by no means a stand-in and very, very welcome. I know you've done a lot of hard work on not just this area, but a range of different areas in the planning department, so you're very welcome, Joe.
Thank you. So this report relates to a supplementary planning document for residential and non-residential parking provision. We have an existing SPD which relates solely to residential development, and that was approved back in 2012. That sets minimum parking standards, as I say, solely for new residential development in Gedling Borough. There is cross-reference elsewhere to county council documents in relation to non-residential development. Once this latest SPD is adopted, then our previous 2012 document will be superseded. So this latest document includes reference to both residential and non-residential development. In terms of non-residential development, there is a cross-reference to the County's Highways Design Guide and policies within our local planning document. The SPD recognises the importance of parking on the layout and design of all new residential development. It also sets standards for parking which take account of factors which are likely to affect car ownership. So those include the type of dwelling, whether it's houses or flats, the size of the dwelling, the location of the dwelling, whether it's in rural or urban areas, and the type of parking required, whether it's allocated to specific dwellings or unallocated. In addition, the SPD includes more detailed guidance. So, for example, it sets minimum sizes for garages and parking spaces, and also addresses electronic vehicle charging. The key change from our previous 2012 document is that it applies a consistent approach to all site sizes. Our previous document took a different approach to small sites, less than 5 dwellings. In order to predict future levels of car ownership, the parking requirements set out in the SPD, they basically use census data from 2011 and then project that forward using the national trip end model. What this has done is it results in no change to the parking requirement for flats, but there are slight differences, and those are generally increases to the requirements for parking spaces in both urban and rural locations. So the draft document has been subject to a consultation exercise, initially informal consultation in conjunction with the Highways Authority, and then a formal public consultation which took place in October, between October and December last year. We received a number of comments from a wide range of bodies, which we were really pleased to see, so including local authorities, statutory consultees, developers, local residents and councillors, and those comments related to a wide range of issues. So we've been digesting those comments and made a number of fairly minor changes to the report. Generally, those changes were for clarification, so pulling more information in from the Highway Design Guide for ease of reference, so relating to the permeability of driveways and parking areas, more references to cycle parking and e-bike charging, and clarification of distances and sizes. So once adopted as a supplementary planning document, this latest document will be a material consideration and can be given significant weight in determining planning applications. So Cabinet is asked to adopt this latest parking SPD and so that it can be published on their website and used to determine planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Joe. Any comments or questions? Councillor Ellis?
Thank you, and thanks, Joe, for the SPD and presenting it. I notice in the 2012 version, there's a table that compares that position in 2012 with 2006. I can't find anything in here that would, as a layperson, tell me what the difference is in the new policies. Is there a quick and easy way of saying what the difference is between what is now and what will be after we adopt this one?
There isn't a document that we've made available comparing the two. I guess once this is adopted, this will supersede the previous one. But in essence, the changes are really minor in relation to the unallocated spaces. So where, for example, you have 3 allocated spaces in an urban area and the requirement, sorry, I haven't got it off the top of my head, is say 0.6 of an allocated space, that may have changed to 0.7. So it really is very minor, and those changes will only be cumulative where there's a large number of dwellings as part of a development. So we haven't included that as part of the document, but the changes I think are relatively minor, so I don't think it's essential. Councillor Barnes.
Thank you for the report. Can I just ask a question? Is is there anything we can do as regards people parking on the road when they've got space to take their cars off the road? We've got residents on our street have got space to put cars and they park it on the road. And they're just making the road so narrow now. And this is not just happening in my area. I'm sure it happens everywhere. Some people seem to be too bloody lazy to take the car off the road when they can do. And it's becoming a problem everywhere now where cars are parked on pavement. I mean, you go around, I know some of the roads it's difficult. Acton Road and Furlong Avenue, it's very difficult. There's all cars are parked on there. But there is some cars who could park the cars off the road, but they're just too damn lazy to do it. And I just wondered if there's anything which we can pursue as a kind of saying, please try and park sensibly or park off. If you can park off the road, park off the road. I mean, they're bloody crazy.
Well, this document is in part trying to help resolve that. So the extra allocation of spaces for the houses in question will go some way to addressing the point you make, Peter, which we would all recognise as councillors in our own wards. But there's also a role there for the county council to play in terms of potentially parking restrictions or other schemes put in place. I can tell you as a county councillor, they aren't always the most difficult to get for local areas. And there is also a role for the police. But of course, we know the police force is increasingly stretched in terms of its responsibilities and some of the issues it's faced with government reductions. But this document does go some way to addressing some of those issues. And in saying that, I just want to say thank you, Alison, Joe, to you and the team for the work that you have done, because what I also thought was good is in the consultation we got a number of comments, and actually we've listened and we've reflected back. I thought the comments made around, you know, the need for permeable covering for parking areas, and that's been reflected, you know, as a point that was made. Somebody made a point about cycling, which is referenced in the Nottinghamshire County Council highway design standards that we are using as part of this document, but we've made that even clearer in following the consultation, and also welcome the support from some of our parish councils that is referenced in here and our local residents. So I think it shows that we've listened. We've gone out there with a proposal. There's a tweak as well, isn't there, to make sure that over 4-bedroom houses have 3 allocated spaces as a result of some of the feedback in the consultation. So I think it demonstrates we've listened to what a range of different people said in the consultation. And as Councillor Barnes says, hopefully this will go some way to alleviating the pressure on roads and on streets when there are new developments coming into place. And hopefully this will make sure that there is adequate parking space in place. Unless there's anything else, Councillor Hollingsworth, yeah.
Yeah, just to echo your thanks to Joe and the team. And I was also very pleased to see people responding to the consultation, and particularly, I think, 2 local residents and minor amendments being made as part of that consultation. So that's very good to see. In terms of what Councillor Barnes was saying, it's a difficult issue in a lot of places. But as long as cars are legally on the road, taxed, insured, and people have licences and all the paperwork and certificates they need, there is nothing to stop people parking on the road. And I'd like to echo what you said about the difficulty with the county council, because trying to get them to make a traffic regulation order and use the powers that they've actually got to assist us and other residents, they're incredibly reluctant to do so. And I think it's about time there was a review of how they looked at TROs to resolve some of these problems.
Thank you, Councillor Hollingsworth. Joe, is there anything you want to say in response to any of the issues raised?
Only briefly to say that part of the purpose of the SPD includes guidance on what constitutes a parking space, which has been clarified over and above what was in the previous document. So in response to Councillor Barnes' point in terms of tandem parking, where what counts as a space in terms of a garage space and then parking in front of that, and the size of spaces. So if spaces are more usable, I think people are going to be more inclined to use them over the road. So that's certainly the intention behind the document, to make sure that we're reflecting, to make sure that it's about the right provision, as not just numbers, but spaces are appropriately sized and located.
Thank you very much, Joe. So the recommendations are that Cabinet adopts the parking provision for residential and non-residential development supplementary planning document, that we authorise the planning policy manager to publish the document, and that we delegate authority to the planning policy manager in consultation with the portfolio holder for growth and regeneration to make any minor typographical, formatting or factual amendments to the parking provision for residential and non-residential developments supplementary planning document. I'll move those recommendations. Councillor Hollingsworth seconded them. Colleagues happy to approve? They are agreed unanimously. Thank you very much, Joe, and please pass on our thanks to all the colleagues involved in the work on that particular document. Okay, item 10 on the agenda then is the decision of the Ombudsman following a complaint against the Council, which is on page 291 to 300 in the pack, and this is a report of our monitoring officer, so I'm going to hand over to Fran.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, members may be familiar with this type of report. It's a statutory duty triggered once a finding of maladministration causing injustice is made by the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. In this instance, a complaint was made to the Council through the Council's complaints process in relation to the administration of an additional restrictions grant application. A complaint was made at stage 1. It was responded to by the appropriate officer. That complaint was then escalated to stage 2 as the complainant was not satisfied with the response. Again, a response was issued by a more senior officer, and as is within the complainant's gift, they were not satisfied with that response, and therefore they took their complaint to the Local Government and Social Care Ombudsman. This then triggered, in this instance, an investigation by the Ombudsman into this complaint. As you'll see, the response and the decision by the Ombudsman is attached to the report at Appendix 1. And ultimately, the majority of the complaint was not upheld. So the Ombudsman found no fault in the way the Council had actually handled the administration of the grant or the decision in relation to refusing that particular grant application. However, and you'll see when you read through the detail of the decision, through the grant application process for this particular grant, and members will be aware there was a number of grant schemes running at this particular time and over the COVID-19 pandemic. This particular grant application, it was an additional restrictions grant, had some mandatory criteria imposed by government through the government guidance, and one of the criteria was that applicants had to have been trading on the 1st of October 2020 to be eligible for the grant. This particular applicant initially made an application and indicated they weren't trading. There was then some back and forth between the applicant and the Council, including assessments of their tax records to establish the nature, was this individual in fact trading at the correct time. Ultimately, the Council considered that the evidence provided was not sufficient to amount to evidence of trading on the 1st of October, and so that grant application was refused. It did take some time to determine this particular application because there was quite a lot of back and forth with the applicant. It involved input from revenue services who are administering the grants and financial services who were called in to assist with the interpretation of the guidance and the accounts that were submitted to them. Ultimately, as I say, the Ombudsman found that the decision was the correct one. However, during the course of the administration of the grant, an email was sent out in error to this particular applicant, advising them that because they had been successful for an ARG grant, there was other grants that would now potentially be available to them. This was sent out in error. It was sent out to a number of applicants. At this point, the application had not been determined, so that email was premature. The Council responded to this email the next day, apologising for any confusion caused by this email being sent out. However, unfortunately, due to this error in the process, the Ombudsman has made a finding of maladministration causing injustice in relation to this particular element. They have not, however, recommended that any action be taken by the Council and were satisfied that the apology issued by the Council, which was issued swiftly, was sufficient remedy in this particular instance. The duty under Section 5A of the Local Government and Housing Act is that I make this report to you as the Executive and circulate it to all members, which I have done. The recommendations are that you note the decision of the Ombudsman, that the report is circulated, which it has been, and that a report be prepared on behalf of the Executive setting out any action to be taken and the reasons for that action. It's my proposal that the Ombudsman is satisfied with the action that has already been taken in relation to this complaint, and it's my recommendation that there is no further action required in relation to this particular case. As you all will be aware. The business grant scheme and continuing schemes that are issued from government were numerous. The guidelines were ever-changing, and officers, both in revenues and finance, had a huge undertaking to administer all these grants to all these businesses. And I think it's fair to say the intent of those, particularly with the discretionary schemes, was always that as many businesses as possible who were eligible could receive that grant. It's unfortunate that there was a slight administrative error in this case, and that the finding is what it is, but ultimately the majority of the complaint was not upheld, and the Ombudsman did feel that there was certainly no fault in how the Council considered the application and determined it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fran, for your explanation. And I think that the important thing here for me, and I'm just going to read this, is the Ombudsman's report and the concluding 3 paragraphs, which are titled Conclusion in the Ombudsman's report, which says this, for transparency purposes: there is no fault in how the Council considered Mr M's ARG, that's Additional Restrictions Grant application, or his various other grant applications. The Council was entitled to decide the evidence did not show he was trading on or before the 1st of October, and he could not qualify for the LRSG, which is another grant, or restart grant schemes because he is not liable for business rates. That other driving instructors may have received grants does not alter this. The second paragraph says there was some delay in the Council's decision on Mr M's Additional Restrictions Grant application, although this is partly attributed to its need to seek additional information from him, but this delay is not a significant point, and it was for the Council to decide what evidence it needed Mr M to submit. The final concluding paragraph from the Ombudsman reads: the Council was at fault for sending Mr M an email, which has been referenced by our monitoring officer, which wrongly implied his Additional Restrictions Grant application had succeeded, and this fault caused Mr M some distress. However, the Ombudsman goes on to say, the Council acted quickly to rectify and apologise for its error, and I consider this is adequate to remedy the injustice to Mr M. The final decision of the Ombudsman is that I have completed my investigation, and I'm quoting the Ombudsman, with a finding of fault causing injustice, as I've just referenced, but which the Council has already remedied. So I'm satisfied as Chair of today's meeting, the Executive, that the Monitoring Officer's advice should be followed, and I'm taking advice, Fran, but I think that means that we only need to approve recommendations 1 and 2, because recommendation 3 would be a further report by the Executive, but that's not required, is it? There'll be a report just saying
there
no
will
further
be a further report. So what I will do is prepare, following your discussion today, I will prepare that report and then circulate it to the Executive for your consideration, confirming...
No further action?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so recommendations are that the Ombudsman decision at Appendix 1 be noted, that it be noted that a copy of the Ombudsman report has been circulated to all members of the Council, and that a report be prepared on behalf of the Executive by the Monitoring Officer, setting out that no further action will be taken given that the apology has been made and remedied, and the reasons for it being prepared. I'll move those recommendations. We have a seconded by Councillor Ellis. People happy to approve them? It's agreed unanimously. And item 11 is any other items the Chair considers urgent, which I am not aware of. So I will formally close the meeting. Thank you, everybody.